they want to keep their job. That's why your epic formula to mathematical question, that is why they want to share it, because they want to keep their job. They're rational. By giving this good education, they actually keep their jobs. Employers will see that they are good at teaching and they want their professors to stay. And now, how will this give better education? Which actually ties very nicely to my first point. The skills of the professors to teach will be kept at top level. Why? Like I've actually said, these professors want to keep their job. They want, because they know that there's competition. There are other professors out there that might be better than them. They might get demoted, and some other professors, some young kiddo, might suddenly get promoted. And they don't want to do that. They don't. Either one, they don't get shamed. Two, they want to keep their jobs. Three, they want to keep their financial earnings. Their financial, how much they earn and everything from their positions. They don't want to get demoted. They don't want to get sacked. No sensible person wants to get sacked of their job. And professors who try their very best to give best education, knowing that they might get demoted or worse, come to worse, fired. Like I said, yes.
So how exactly do you distinguish between good and average professors when it comes to the point where they're all the same?
Can you repeat that? I don't know, more clear.
How exactly do you put the distinction between good and average educators when all their work are considered just the same, so it has no value?
I have no idea how that relates to this, but I have no idea how it relates to this, but I'll just answer it anyway. Well, you can get feedback from the students. You can just get feedback from the students how well this professor teach, and review and compare it between our lecturers. Stuff like that. It's easy. Okay, anyway, now I'm going to tell you what will happen if it's not abolished. If this tenure for university level education is not abolished. One, professors would slack off, knowing that their job is secure, like I said just now. Like you guys gave some certainty, and this is actually one of my rebuts. These professors, knowing that their job is secure, I can just go into the lecture room and just surf Facebook. I don't care. I just, do this and this, read from page this to this, and go ahead, just do whatever you want. These good lecturers, once good, they deteriorate into some nonsensical lecturers that actually think that, because my job is secure, I don't need to do this. Why bother, right? Why take up a headache and teach? And not only will education deteriorate, but future generations will not develop well. Because these lecturers are actually teaching the young generations. The young generations are the future generations. And what happens if future generations are not well educated? They won't progress well. I think that's the word. So, and how are all these state bad? Why should you care about all this education deteriorate and all these kind of things? One, like I said, because the country will be in ruins. Right? The country will not have this once so well educated people that actually are building the country right now. And by implying this new tenure concept, country wouldn't be as good as before. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, are these tenures really good for education level, for this university level education?
I am not a university student, but if I were to relate my high school life and change it into a university life, there would be a professor, a teacher right now, but I would see her as a professor, and her name is Juan Rachel, and she is the best teacher I've ever had, and to see her getting crushed, her dreams crushed and her hopes down after knowing that she's been in probation for a really long time. And then the next day, she found out the news that tenure would be abolished. It would break and crush my heart and soul to see that she's not getting what she deserved. So, before that, with a very cliche saying, I'm going to start with my rebuttals. Side government said, that it would encourage competition. Now we tell you what competition are there when these professors are placed in a specific area for their field. Now let me tell you that, let me start off with my substances. Let me talk about the harm first, and then I will go with the benefit. Yes.
Man, education is an ever-evolving construct that requires people to live up to the modern standard. How is your tenure ensuring that all professors will always live up to the consistently evolving society?
Okay. First of all, when they get offered a tenure, when they dedicate their life to this institution, they feel like when they are promised to have a secure job, they would have the motive to do better. And when they have the motive to do better, they would also have the motive to contribute to the institution. Now let me talk about the harm if tenure is abolished. First of all, if I could be sacked from my job, I won't have the motive to share such great discovery from my research. For example, if I discover a cure for cancer, and I found out that I won't get a secure job, why should I even contribute to the institution? Now, so basically, and when I don't contribute to the constitution, globally wise, people on the floor would suffer because they would miss out something big. For example, the cure of cancer. Now, no, I've taken one. Humans, I tell you that humans are very selfish. If I have the cure to cancer, I want my name attached to the institution. I actually have the motive to contribute it. But after knowing that I won't be promised a secure job, what's the point of contributing to an institution that won't even give me a place to dedicate my life forever? No, I've taken one. I've said that before. No. Let's talk about more harms of abolishing tenure. We tell you that professors think they would deserve tenure, and when we abolish tenure, we let them down, we crush their hopes, and they would lose trust with their system. They would turn their heads around, they would get angry, and then thus having them to. Okay, when they turn their heads around, from the university, from the institution, they would lose motive into educating students while knowing they aren't going to last, knowing that they don't have a secure job. Like, hey, what's the point of me teaching the students very well when next thing I know I'm going to get sacked? So it worries them when they don't get tenure. It worries them knowing they don't have a secure job, and they need this secure job to support their life. And when they can support their life, they can do better job performance because they know that they finally have a motive into contributing things and stuff like that. Now let's talk about the benefits. When people have tenure, their job would be secure. And when their job is secure, they don't have to worry about supporting their life, and therefore they won't have distraction. And when they don't have distraction, we tell you that they could perform better, they could focus on their students better, focus on contributing to the institution, because which great educator, which great professor doesn't want to contribute and raise their image of their universities? We tell you that when tenure is offered, they appreciate it, and they would express their appreciation by dedicating their life to their job. They would help with teaching students better, and like I said, their job performance would be better. And let me tell you that Gina has said we allow tenure after they undergone years of probation. They undergone years of probation, and this way we could choose the right professors to educate students after going through their history, their background, if they're qualified enough to deserve this tenure. We would choose the people carefully who deserve tenure. And when we choose people carefully, we get better professors to actually educate students. We get better professors to educate students, and then when we get better professors, they would have the motive into making sure these students have better grades. Now, let's talk about humility. Like I said, if I had found a cure to cancer from my discovery, and I was offered tenure. No, I said I have taken one, and I will not take another one. Yeah, if I had found cancer and I was offered tenure, I would appreciate it and show my appreciation by contributing my research. And therefore, it would benefit not only the institution, but benefit the whole of humanity. Because once I found the cure of cancer and they share it, they would basically, well, doctors would make use of it, and then humans finally don't have to worry. And let's say for a bigger case like AIDS. Now everyone wants to find the cure to AIDS. Now if I found the cure to AIDS, I would gladly give out my research. I would be proud, but required that I am offered tenure and my name would be attached to the institution. Now, what my site has proven is the benefits, the harms, and the things that professors would do, you know, how they would express their appreciation, and then basically, yeah, that's what we've proven, and therefore I think site opposition from my team has won this case.
Let's the member of parliament to initiate the closing part.
Yes, you are. I will take you. Mr. Speaker, this debate has to go beyond meritocracy of educators and about its professors being able to better equip themselves with knowledge. This debate is about modernizing education and the way we treat younger professors. Because we think at the expense of giving tenure to older professors, you are systematically disincentivizing a large portion of individuals to becoming professors. Because we think that is in itself a disability of us to progress research, to progress methodology, and to progress education per se. So we think the extension will, from my said would be twofold about why we think incentivizing newer educators is particularly important when it comes to research and development and finding the cure for cancer, if you want to. Or my second extension is going to be about the principle of education and why we think meritocracy is the beyond and end of education. We think it systematically devalues what education stands for. But third of all, my third extension is going to be optimizing the definite rights of students to get the best from education and why we think so. Because we think we kind of know what closing opposition is going to run this debate. Where is the line you draw when you can say someone is doing a bad job? We think opening government did a pretty good job of explaining to you when there are clear evidences where the student body has showed feedback, where they don't like the way this professor is teaching, or in the event where we can tell that this professor is not coping up to the standards, what do you do then? Do you stick with tenure or in dire circumstances of discrimination, which we think is not a valid standard of meritocracy, or do you go on to establish where meritocracy starts and where it ends? Before I go on to my extensions, two issues. First of all, how do we incentivize professors? Because basically opening opposition's case was if there's loyalty, we think it doesn't promote complacency because there's a duty to the university that pushes them to go the extra mile. First of all, we think complacency is the very thing that loyalty breeds, because we think loyalty breeds the ability of individuals to say, I have done my duty to the university owes me something. We think that kind of mentality is counterproductive to three things. Number one, for them to integrate newer types of methodology, because we think society has progressed to value different types of method within systems. We think older professors never co-opt with this type of standards because they're so hardbound about their older standards that got them their tenure to begin with. So we don't think these people will naturally have incentive to improve. But second of all, we think these people lack the ability to make cost-benefit analysis. What does this mean? If you want to fund research into whatever technology you want to talk to you about, these people don't have any form of risk calculus because they are being funded non-stop because they have the ability to grasp funding. We think these people fund research for the sake of funding research to prolong their tenure. We think these are things that exist within society that's systematic problematic. But second of all, they wanted to incentivize professors to release research for them to give the best of education, not to be stingy. What is their assumption? Their assumption was that if you do not extend the accolade or the prestige to these people, these people will never be able to extend the methodology to students. Two responses. Number one, if you come up with the cure of cancer, you will get your name on the cure, nonetheless under our side. But second of all, even if that's not the case, our side pushes you, because under our side, you do not further your studies. If you do not push the class to do better, you will get kicked out. So we think that prestige and all those accolades can exist on our side, but the point at which that does not become the incentive for teachers, this is a perfectly better incentive. But third of all, how do we better students? Because they also wanted the value of education to be better. We think our extension deals with this very well. First of all, we think students are better equipped with learning abilities when teachers evolve. Because we think an evolution of teachers means an evolution in teaching methods. But second of all, in the event where this evolution does not occur, we think we systematically degrade education's value when professors refuse to move on because they know 10 years there, because newer professors cannot come up with the new types of methods that we're talking about. My extension, but before that, sure, ma'am.
The idea of wanting to pinpoint the fact that older professors are really qualified because they are back in the 80s days isn't really the benchmark for you to say whether they are good or not, considering they are more experienced.
We think experience is something that people can garner, but second of all, experience does not mean you're the better professor. If you are a 100-year-old professor who can teach the modern society, modern classroom with your methods and become better, we think we will obviously not throw you out of the job. This debate is about people who don't wish to modernize, who don't want to come up to the standards of society. What do you do then? Answer that question. Let's talk about the progression of religion. Because first of all, we think that the type of methodologies people use are often inconsistent with the methods unique in society. Which means to say physics and all these other scientific fields have developed far beyond when these teachers got 10 years ago. We think their method of evaluating these teachers is ineffective because only in dire circumstances will you do so. So if you stick with the principles of physics, you'll be fine. Or we think teaching the principle of physics does not mean education has been achieved, because we think education is about evolving people's mindset. It's about teaching people to be progressive. We don't think education is a vomit and swallow process. But even in that event, we think the mental calculus of these individuals will be changed. Why? Because it's a large incentive for them to develop their methods in a conducive manner. So yes, they may be experienced, yes, they may be well off, but we think there's no incentive for them to develop in a manner that's contingent, that is cohesive with what society right now is pushing forward. So we think there's no incentive for them to do so. But second of all, this debate is about the opportunity cost, because we think the mobility of educators is important to society. Why so? Because first of all, we think just because you're older and you're more experienced does not automatically mean you're better than a person who's younger. We think there are a lot of educators within status quo who are better equipped to deal with this. How is the problem under their side perpetuated? Two reasons. Number one, there is no incentive for these professors or these younger educators to get tenure to begin with. Because if you agree with opening up position, say that these people get prestige and that they're loyal to their university and universities benefit a lot. Universities never take up the burden of developing new talent. But even then, it's harder for them to penetrate the system because the system only funds people who have tenure. The system funds individuals who already have a name. We think the type of benchmark you set disincentivizes this individual from doing so. But why is it so important for us to fund or to in essence, ensure that young educators get the opportunity? Why so? Two reasons. Because we think a lot of scientific research, a lot of scientific approaches come from different people. They might not come from these 100-year-old teachers, or if they are, we think we incentivize them better. But a lot of people are there have different people. We think giving them an opportunity is important. But my second extension is about the principle of education and why we think it's important. Because we think there's a lack of debate in opening houses about the principle of education and what it really means to be educated. Because we think education is a meritocratic system. It values the individual worth of a person at a particular time. So we think getting tenure 10 months ago or 10 years ago does not necessarily mean you are principally meritocratic within time. So we think it's a time-specific context that you need to acknowledge. But second of all, when meritocracy becomes the be-all and end-all, we think giving educators tenure means you're not valuing the very meritocracy you accord to students. Which brings me to my third idea about how we think students have a right to a better education. Because we think these people pay for it. Education, tertiary education, is not cheap within even Western liberal democracies. We think universities and the government have an ability or have the accountability to these individuals. Because we think any form of education that's not in line with modern society, that's not in line with these older individuals teaching standards that not necessarily give them good grades are problematic. Because our extension is very simple. If you do believe these 100-year-old teachers, 50-year-old teachers are really good individuals who have the experience, knowledge, and capacity to do so, they will evolve. Our side gives the incentive for you to evolve. In the event where you don't, we are very happy to give it to a 30-year-old individual who might be more better than you. We think that's what we want on closing.
The qualification of certain educators or continuing upon what they have achieved and their status that has been granted upon them, that is awarded for them depending on the job and depending on what they have accomplished previously. So when it comes to a point whereby government side tries to bring forth the idea of you trying to increase the education system and you wanting to enhance that particular job market, we tell you that can also work under our paradigm, regardless if tenure being that. We tell you that when it comes to a point whereby they try to create an evolving system whereby you want to grant this particular tenures and have this whole idea of you equalizing every single person, we tell you it's not justified because we award good people, we demerit bad people. Before that, a few rebuttals, right? Firstly, opening government tried to bring up the idea of you keeping educators in check. We tell you that already occurs in status quo, whereby these people will have constantly being checked upon, and the idea whereby like, this tenure doesn't give you a spot-free form of job. They will actually have constant checks for you and already have check and balances that already exist in status quo. That is why when it comes to a point that even if we tell you that that is not working, we already have the student council to bring forth this whole idea of that professor underperforming. Second rebuttal of how they say they want to give more power to the employers. We tell you that when it comes to the idea that these people, when it comes to the idea of you granting tenure for certain educators, already give them that particular power. But what happens when you do not give tenure for professors? The administration board would decrease in power and the value of you even having to be a qualified or a certified professional educator isn't even that. Yes.
Ma'am, the current standard is to discriminate individuals or there's a severe harm when you don't even attend classes. What is your standard if you're not going to contradict the government side?
Thank you. When it comes to a point whereby they try to say what exactly is the factor or benchmark for you to ensure that person is performing or not, we tell you that already occurs in naturally when it comes to a point whereby these professors, when they are granted tenure, they have more of a tendency to naturally uphold that particular status instead of you shutting out every single thing and just assume they are an average educator. That is the benefit of you granting that particular tenure for a certain educator. Still a rebuttal of how they try to say that you want the old versus young educators and whereby you want to ensure the allocation of these particular tenures or even the certification of certain qualified professors are being distributed properly and the whole idea of meritocracy. We tell you that that is exactly what opposition is for. We fight for meritocracy. We want to certify professional educators. Why? How so? How exactly do you certify a person being a professional or not? By granting tenure for certain people who have potential, who can actually uphold the status of that particular university and to ensure the standards of their teachings. That is what we do. That is the particular benchmark people go for. That is why we believe that when it comes to higher institutions, we want to ensure their standard and status is being upheld. Moving on to my extensions, right? Before that, a few questions, right? What exactly does the tenure give you? Nothing, something government side does not acknowledge at all. The fact that it gives you the idea of valued certifications, whereby now your job and your profession has more value when it comes to a point whereby you are acknowledged by your achievements and that you are considered an individual that is very much valuable to that particular institution, and you are also granted more funding given that you want to do your research. Therefore, those are added benefits, and also the safety net of you having a fixed job. No, thank you. What exactly do we grant tenure for good educators? We want to certify their job performance, grant benefits, and secure employment. And lastly, the question of actually who does this affect? It affects a lot of benefactors who find the money for that particular institution. The fact that these benefactors who actually contribute money for that particular institution wants to ensure that these people are high-performing people. How do you pinpoint that? Not just through a student's feedback. You don't do that. The idea of you having to ensure that how many tenured professors are in your institution, that is the idea of me wanting to even think whereby my contribution and my funding for that particular university is even worth it. And also for universities, how it affects them. They want to qualify for high-performing institutions to ensure their standards are being upheld and they have potentially good or even better and excellent educators. That is how they uphold the status. Moving on to my extensions. I have two extensions, which is first, incentive for educators, and secondly, idea of professionalism. This is how we differ with opening house, right? We tell you that when it comes to a point whereby you want to incentivize educators, it's not just the idea of loyalty. It's more the idea of you recognizing that particular job they are even working for, that hard work they have gone on for being a lecturer's assistant. That is the whole idea. We want to recognize the fact that we want to encourage them to perform. So during probationary period, we'll have more of a tendency to perform when it comes to a point whereby they have a particular goal to go for, which is having a secure and permanent employment employment. Therefore, these people will have more of a tendency to go for that particular employment. And also, this is also parallel to employees being granted permanent employment, whereby the responsibility is naturally triggered. When you are being awarded this particular tenure, it will be naturally for you to uphold that particular status, because you know that your particular position is at stake regardless of other people, because you know that a lot of people are looking at you and you symbolize that particular institution. Also, is the idea of how it will backlash in the idea of value of work. The fact that when we do not recognize their particular hard work and we completely shut out all their good achievements, will actually retaliate and will lead to a backlash whereby now they will start to regress. The fact that they believe that their hard work are not being acknowledged at all and they are not being funded for all their hard work, we tell you that when it comes to a point whereby you want to produce good educators, it won't be that. Last one.
We'll acknowledge them when the time is there. You do something well, we'll give you an award to acknowledge it. Tell me why that award is to continue on 10 years after that achievement has been done.
Exactly. When it comes to a point whereby it's not just there's not a timestamp for your particular achievement, regardless of that particular tenure. Just because you've made research and you were granted tenure 10 years ago doesn't mean 10 years in the future you should not acknowledge that particular achievement. The fact that even if these people, it's not about just the achievements you have, it's about the achievement of you being a good educator to begin with. Moving on to my second extension, which is idea of professionalism, whereby we want to ensure that that particular place is considered as a professional environment, to ensure that we want to pinpoint and extract certain and very much qualified people to ensure the standard of that particular university. What happens if you do not put a distinction of good and average educators? That is when you actually create a university that is fighting for a high-performing rank. The fact that there are certain universities, for example, like Oxford or Cambridge or Yale or whatever other universities, these people want to ensure that their professors they admit into are qualified and certified. So what exactly are the forms? You cannot wait for a certain ward or a student to come up to you and tell you that you are qualified. You need a particular thing in your record, in your employment record, that you are a certified one and you are tenured. That is exactly the benchmark people are looking for, and that is equalizing to you, giving more benefits and actually you funding more towards that university. So you're actually giving people more of an incentive to work for that particular goal. Because when it comes to the point whereby you deny and you ignore these particular achievements and their hard work, that is when you are like shutting out all the single opportunities for these universities and the students and the professors. Thank you.
Thank you for your position.
How will the world look like in their policy? Will be a world that values a person's ability to stay in a job rather than the progression of ideas or the progression of education in how we teach students that come to these universities. Because the entire opposition bench only wants to value like how much appreciation that we can still give to these teachers, or how much value these teachers have that we have to still respect. And you know what? We've agreed to all of that, that these teachers do have that value. But we think that the progression of education and ideas and extension that was never engaged with on our side is something that takes more importance over keeping these teachers there. We are willing to we are willing to still keep teachers who have tenure who will progress their ideas. But this debate has to go beyond everything that they've said about all teachers, and we have to start limiting it to teachers who don't want to progress, because that's who we want to not eliminate, get rid of, because these are because the progression of ideas are exactly what we have to protect here. So let's go on into this extension from CO, because the first issue today is about how the value of achievements versus the value of education. And this is a contradiction, the first contradiction coming from their side, because they're willing to have administration boards who can decrease your power. They're still willing to have checks and balances. They were still willing to have all of these regulatory bodies, because they're willing to keep regulating these teachers and keep checking up on them. But they're not willing to go beyond the standard of actually getting rid of that tenure, of actually punishing that teacher in the way they see fit, because they only want to take a very soft stance and be fluffy about it in how we treat these teachers. In fact, it's already a principal concession
question because they think having to keep regulating these teachers mean that they are doing something wrong. And when you are doing something wrong, you're not punishing them, you're just willing to keep them there, keep regulating them instead. But then this idea on the value of your achievements, like the value of your achievements being contingent on what you do, and that, yeah, on whatever you do. We think on this side, this value is better, like the value that we propose is better because we can still allow the progression of your ideas. Like we'll still respect that you had, like that you did have some value at that point. But because society is evolving and society is modernizing, that doesn't mean you are out of the picture. You have to modernize along with it. We have to have we have to have ideas that are still relevant to the times. That's when we think there's more of a value coming from outside. And then that better funding actually leads to prestige in these universities. Universities will still be seen in a positive light. Universities will still be seen like in a positive light. They'll still have that prestige value because now they're actually taking a proactive stance in bettering the education for their students, because they're willing to hire more teachers, willing to take like more progressive stances, more more progressive stances, maintain the best form of research that's modern to the times, and that's why it's proactive. They're not going to be seen as regressive, they're not going to be seen as dinosaurs of their time, so they still maintain that prestige. Finally, on their side, is that this incentive to be an educator. And we think that this is actually a wrong characterization, because the only incentive to be an educator is the far-off possibility that I could get tenure, or the far-off possibility of me being appreciated for my work. One, we think that incentives for people exist in so many ways. You become a teacher because, hey, it might be fulfilling to you, or I like teaching, or I am very committed to my job. I'm very committed to all of these things, and I have a self-prestige value. And the thing is, we still, if you want to fight for this prestige value, we still recognize that in status quo. We give you awards, we publish your we have published records of your work, we still give you plenty of recognition. But this, like, whatever incentive you have to be an educator, whatever incentive they want to protect, shouldn't come at the expense of students, and it shouldn't come at hindering all of these natural ideas or the natural cycle of professors that would have more modern ideas to be able to contribute to these universities. That's all of their that's basically all of their extensions on. But before I go on into what our side is contributing today, sure.
How is it justified for you to strip off any form of security and job employment for these professors when you actually deny anything and they can just lose their jobs anytime?
Okay, the thing is, if you're losing your job at any time, it's because you're being punished for something that you already it's being punished because you are being a bad professor, because you are not fulfilling your job requirements. We're not taking it away willy-nilly. We're not taking away because we like to. We're taking it away because we're punishing you, and that's the form of punishment that we are going to go beyond, not simply regulating them. But now, this extension that was never dealt with from our side, which is very sad, because now there are bigger ideas at stake, bigger ideas beyond the sympathy that we feel for professors. And that idea is hindering this progression of education. Now, we limit the evolution of these ideas. We limit the evolution of teaching methods in how teachers can now be modernized, and they have to cater to a modernizing and growing culture of students, because they might adapt to the way you teach in a different way compared to old professors. And now the university still takes a proactive stance in updating these ideas of the past. They still have this prestige value. They're still seen in a positive light. All those benefits they talked about can still exist on our side. But we now have the responsibility towards maintaining the best form of research in these current times by having these modern professors. This is the risk that universities will take, but they will take it in the best trade-off that can come from this debate. We were the only side of the debate who was willing to change these problems, because we think people who still rely, these are only people who still rely on their versions of research, or who still don't want to modernize or update themselves. And that's why we've been the only side that has been consistent with the central area of this debate. But finally, let's talk about the one thing, one important thing coming from opening, about how about protecting this sense of loyalty that professors have. First of all, this is the idea that professors would leave because now they're so invested. They're only there because they have a sense of loyalty towards these universities. This is already a contradiction on their side, because people who are professors who are so invested in their field, who are so invested in teaching these students, will still remain loyal. They'll still remain, like, not because there's a far-off threat of you being taken out of your job. Promotions are not the only incentive for professors to stay. The prestige value of being part of that university, the prestige value of even being a professor in your own right still exists on our side. But even if it doesn't, we're still willing to forego all of this so we have that progression of education, so that people who leave will still be replaced by modern professors, so that the natural cycle of professors is always protected in comparison to the rights of professors.
Thank you. Let's have the final speaker of the debate.
Mr. Speaker, we think that under the government side, they have very weak justifications, and we think under their side, they haven't proven to us specifically what are the factors and what are the concrete reasons on why they should actually abolish tenure for university level educators. Debating motion, this House will not abolish tenure for uni level educators. We as the opposition disagree with the motion. So before I move on to my questions and issues for the day, let's move on to three rebuttals coming from their side, right? Firstly, the first speaker from the opening side came up and said how when you abolish tenure, you keep the professors in check. We feel that two responses to this, right? Firstly, granting them tenure are the reason to assure their places at a uni level, as a uni level educator, right? Because why? We think that under their paradigm, they don't want to grant any sort of appreciation towards the professors who have devoted their life and time towards their career, right? Second issue, second rebuttal on how about they think that by doing this gives more power to the employers, right? We think that if there is no concrete reason to strip off that tenure, we don't see a problem on why they should actually abolish tenure to begin with. Because now what they are doing is that they are abolishing tenure for all uni-level educators, right? And we don't feel that this is fair under their paradigm, because what we feel is that they are also harming educators who are not doing a single problem. Sorry, I'll take you a minute. Thirdly, on how they said that then these professors can do whatever they want. Mr. Speaker, we tell you this, they get stripped of their tenure when they fail to fulfill basic employment duties, right? Secondly, we think that there are such things as evaluations during lectures to ensure that the professors don't become complacent and that they fulfill their basic employment duties to begin with. We don't feel that there is a problem in under this case. But before that, Ashwarya.
Basic levels of education mean that they are very simplistically principles of physics, for example. Tell me why education cannot evolve to incorporate teaching individuals, incentivize and teaching the modern technology methods that we talked about.
Mr. Speaker, we tell you this. Under their side, they're assuming that these old educators cannot undergo modernization, and they assume that these old professors cannot teach these current generations. We see that in Oxford and in Cambridge, right? Current professors, they are old. We think that that the age factor isn't a legit factor for you to actually abolish tenure to begin with, right? Done with that. And fourthly, how they say that passion is not important. We thought that we're not talking about passion to begin with. What we're talking about is about the dedication that they have shown towards their universities, towards their career. This is what we want. This is what we want to grant them. This is why we want to grant them tenure to begin with, because we appreciate their work and we appreciate their dedication towards that university, right? Fifthly, on how they want to encourage competition. We think this is false. We tell you that professors actually compete for tenure. Why? Because they only get granted tenure if they attract enough fundings or if they have demonstrated enough research. Therefore, they have to put in an extremely lot of effort to get that tenure, right? So we think that professors actually should be granted tenure to begin with. Sorry, please sit down. moving on to the issues for today. Firstly, on the issue of complacency versus loyalty, right? We think that the idea of complacency shouldn't even isn't even a big issue to begin with, because once a professor is granted tenure, therefore these professors are loyal to begin with. Why? Because then they want, as what my first speaker said, they want to uphold their status as a good professor. Because then people actually recognize them. Oh, he's a good professor. He is a tenured professor. Therefore, he's good. This is why we think that these professors who want to uphold their status as a tenured professor to begin with. Sorry to sit down. Second issue is this on the evolution of professors versus the qualification of professors. Right? We think that this is an assumption and unfair to say that old professors cannot evolve with current societies. Why? Because we feel that if the younger professors are that good as the old professors, right, then sure, they'll be granted tenure as well. Because then they have shown some sort of dedication or some sort of they have shown some sort of dedication towards a university, right? We feel that age shouldn't be a benchmark or a factor, because the fact that they have contributed so much for the university, this is why they should be recognized to begin with, right? And we feel that once you grant tenure, right, what tenure will do is that it will put trust. It will put trust of students in the professors themselves. Why? Because this is when these students feel assured that my professor is good. They feel assured that my professor is a good professor because then he's a tenured professor. Therefore, I don't have any sense of I don't have any insecurities towards my own professors. Right? Sorry to sit down. I've already taken. We think that we need to certify professors who are professional in a particular institution. We think that is a weak justification coming from them when they only talk about how these dinosaur-aged professors cannot evolve with the current situation, right? So we feel that in status quo, there are already a lot of professors who can adapt to situations and who can continue to teach these students, right? Let's move on to the questions for today. This debate has boiled down to two major questions, right? Firstly, what is the idea of tenure? Why is it crucial to begin with? Under our side, we have justified to you on firstly, this provides a distinction between educators and some sort of qualification of educators in university. Why? Because we already have kept these professors in probation. So if you're good, we grant you tenure, because then we feel that we want to keep you in our university as well. But if you're not good, then we kick you out. We think that this is the simplicity of having tenure to begin with. Because if you're good, then we grant you that sort of appreciation, right? Secondly, we feel that this creates a more professional atmosphere in a particular institution. Because when you grant tenure, then you tell these people that, hey, I think you're professional, I think that you're good, therefore I will grant you tenure to ensure that your place is secure. Secondly, what are the repercussions if you abolish tenure to begin with? Firstly, there won't be a safety net for these professors. Why? Then these professors don't have an incentive to perform better, because they know that their jobs are not even secure in the first place and they won't even get recognized to begin with. We feel that these professors can get kicked off in any instance, right? This happens a lot in status quo, where we see a lot of professors get kicked off because the institution doesn't want to pay or things like that, right? We think that by granting tenure, you avoid these sort of situations where you punish or where you sack professors without any concrete reason to begin with. We want to create a safety net for professors who actually deserve to get a safety net and who actually deserves a place in university to begin with, right? Thank you.
Yeah.